Good afternoon, EDH enthusiasts. I'm the Planeswalker Project, and welcome to a Commander Deck Tech. We are still exploring the wastelands of the Fallout universe, and it seems that more and more of these cards are finding their way into powerful decks. One such example is the Master Transcendent, a 2/4 legendary artifact mutant for 4 mana. When it enters, target player gets 2 radiation counters. You can tap the Master Transcendent to put a target creature card in a graveyard that was milled this turn back onto the battlefield under your control. It then becomes a green mutant with base power and toughness 3/3, losing all other colors and creature types. Now, it's important to note that the Master specifies that the card it reanimates needs to be milled, and so cards like Hermit Druid and Entomb that simply send cards to the graveyard do not work with the Master. Had to do a bit of research on Scryfall for the updated wording on some cards. But first, if you're looking for a deck box that will survive a nuclear winter, I highly recommend Arcane Fortress deck boxes. They are affordable, they are sturdy, and with their stained glass artwork, visually stunning. I've begun housing all of my Forever decks in them. Their radiant stained glass collection of deck boxes can hold over 100 sleeved cards and has a removable tray that can hold dice and counters. All of these are held in place by very powerful magnets that won't pop loose. If you use my affiliate link in the description box below, you'll get a sweet discount on your first purchase. With that out of the way, let's talk about today's build. This deck plays off of the Food Chain strategy, a powerful combo deck that looks to get out Food Chain, a 3-mana enchantment for 2 and 1 green. You can exile a creature that you control to add X mana of any one color, where X is 1 plus the exiled creature's mana value. You can only use that mana to cast creature spells, but this is where the rest of the combo comes into play. See, we're using 2 specific creatures in conjunction with Food Chain, Eternal Scourge and Misthollow Griffin. These 2 creatures have a very unique ability that allows them to be cast while they're in exile, so after you exile them for Food Chain's cost, you can then use that mana that you produce to recast them from exile. After this, you'll still have 1 mana floating, and so you can produce the infinite mana of each color by repeating this procedure. Once we've hit infinite mana, we can then add our commander into the mix. The Master Transcendent can be then cast an infinite number of times using the same Food Chain procedure. The Master's Enter ability will trigger an equally infinite number of times, giving out infinite radiation counters to any players that we wish. Lastly, let's discuss the radiation counters and how they play into the strategy. These are a new mechanic exclusive to the Fallout set. They go on a player, similar to poison and experience counters. At the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, they mill cards equal to the number of rad counters on them. For each non-land card that's milled this way, that player loses 1 life and loses a radiation counter. However, if they have infinite rad counters, as this deck aims to give them, they will mill their entire deck. And potentially, if they mill a number of non-land cards that is greater than or equal to their life total, they will lose on the spot. We also have Nuclear Fallout, which can be an alternate line to victory. Nuclear Fallout is a sorcery spell for X and 2 black. Each creature gets twice -X until the end of turn. Each player gets X rad counters. This works in the same way as using the Master Transcendent and using the infinite mana we generate to give out infinite rad counters. However, this line gives us radiation counters, so we do run the risk of this backfiring should we mill ourselves on the following turn or burn ourselves. We won't lose right away as the rad counter is only milled during the main phase, after our draw step has already occurred. But in the following instance where we would go to draw a card, we would lose based on that state-based action. This, however, is our main strategy, and it's a main focal point of the deck. We are on a number of mill engines to help dump cards from everyone's decks into the graveyard, and there is a decent amount of recursion and reanimation to help ensure that we get the cards we need, even if those cards have been already sent to the bin. We have an assortment of cards that are aimed to help support the milling of our opponents. Classic mill tech like Dreamborn Muse, Fractured Sanity, Altar of the Brood, and Mesmeric Orb can help passively build up a graveyard, while cards like Raoul Troubleshooter can help us return cards from the graveyard to play. An interesting way to play the deck while waiting on the Food Chain assembly is to use our commander to reanimate an opponent's creature that we've had them mill this turn to our side of the battlefield. Hoard of Cunning is a nice piece of mill that also introduces the Monarchy mechanic to the mix, and can potentially mill each player that you choose 10 cards, and that sounds like fun to me. Sir Conrad the Grim and the Bloodchief Ascension both have the capacity to burn our opponents for each of the cards they mill, and then Mindcrank will combo with them to help them keep milling. In some instances, this can even act as an additional win condition. We have some dredge tech in here as well, with cards like Golgari Grave Troll and the Golgari Thug that'll help mill more cards into the graveyard to recur themselves. The Golgari Thug even has an additional bit of recursion, putting a target creature card from our graveyard back on top of our library when it dies. Kaga, Shadow Archrude, allows us to play a land or cast a permanent from among the cards that were put there from the library this turn, i.e. mill, and this is the only card of the deck that also allows us to pitch cards with something like Entomb and recur later. This also lets us mill 2 when Kaga attacks, offering some additional card advantage. Now, because of the nature of mill, we do want to run cards like Scroll Rack and Sensei's Divining Top to help us keep some control over what's on top of our library, so we're not just recklessly milling away all the pieces of our combo. But if that should happen, we do have some options of recursion. The classic Eternal Witness and Noxious Revival are here as simple but effective recursion spells. Since both of the creatures that go into our combo have the ability to be cast from exile, cards like Scavenging Ooze and the Unlicensed Hearse can be used to exile them from the graveyard, which can be incredibly helpful should we have milled them. Dread Return can be helpful in returning one of our combo pieces from the graveyard and can itself be played from the graveyard by simply sacrificing 3 creatures. Reanimate is in the deck, as well as the newcomer Squirming Emergence. Squirming Emergence actually has a number of applications in this deck, as it scales quite nicely as we build up a graveyard. The more cards that we have in a graveyard, the higher mana value the permanent it can return to the battlefield. Animate Dead is in the deck as well as an enchantment-based reanimator spell. Lastly, since our deck runs the possibility of us milling ourselves out entirely, I did want to include Laboratory Maniac as our fallback oh shit button win condition. A lot of the more competitive builds of this commander might capitalize on this possibility with a card like Thassa's Oracle, as this deck is a fantastic vehicle for its combo. I however chose to omit such a powerful win condition in lieu of an old school classic that does just about the same thing. Now, with the way this deck works, we can have some fun interactions. Because we are effectively able to cast spells an infinite number of times once the Food Chain combo is live, we can use something like Hullbreaker Horror to effectively bounce all of our opponent's cards. Mnemonic Betrayal is an excellent usage of our opponent's graveyards, should they have been milled out by our commander. See, the main combo of our deck doesn't have a certainty that it will kill our opponents. But if they have most or their entire library in the graveyard, we can use this, exile every opponent's graveyard, and then produce our infinite mana to cast everything from the cards we've exiled, and then win using their cards. This is a really fun but maybe slightly degenerate method of winning. If we're not able to get them to infinite rad counters effectively, we can hold up a rad storm to hopefully proliferate a few times and get that ball rolling, especially if we are interrupted in our Food Chain combo. This is especially useful if we've somehow gotten to our infinite mana, but lost access to the Master Transcended and cannot give infinite radiation through its ability. The rad storm can simply give infinite proliferate triggers and we continue. So the main strategy of this deck is to get our Food Chain combo assembled and then give out the infinite radiation counters. If this fails, we can fall back on a more traditional mill approach and try to empty our opponent's libraries the old-fashioned way. I think this deck has such a very high ceiling that even though this deck feels very strong to play, I think that there are even more powerful variants that can do a similar thing. On that note, I think this will come to the end of this deck discussion. What are your thoughts on the Master Transcended? Is there some spicy tech that you're using in your deck that might help out this build? Let's discuss it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, likes and shares are some of the best ways to help support the channel. If you're new here and like what you see, feel free to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a new video. I appreciate every one of you for hanging out with me here today, and as always, I'll catch you all next video.